legality of a temporary restraining order blocking the National Guard deployment has yet to be determined. And as we wait for a ruling on that issue from the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, Fox 12's Spencer Schott interviewed a local law professor today to learn more about what we can expect once we do get a ruling.
Now, there's really three ways that this ruling could pan out. The Ninth Circuit Court could agree with the lower judge and keep that temporary restraining order in place, or they could side with the federal government and give them the right to send in the National Guard to Portland immediately. Or the third option, which Professor Yin says is not very likely, is that this Ninth Circuit Court could not issue a ruling at all. But either way, there are a lot of variables in this case. As of Monday, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has not ruled on the temporary restraining order, but Lewis and Clark law professor Tung Yin says the ruling could hold more weight than your average appeal.
Well, I think it would depend on why the Ninth Circuit rules the way that it does.
No matter what the ruling is that comes down, it could be considered a narrow ruling or a broad ruling.
The narrow ruling would simply say, all we're deciding right now is whether the TRO should be in effect.
But a broad ruling would hint at how they think the larger case between the federal government and Oregon will eventually play out.
But a broad ruling would be, again, let's say in favor of the Trump administration. A broad ruling would be, okay, we're going to stay the TRO, and the reason we're staying the TRO is we think that the administration is actually legally correct, that the district judge does not have the authority to second-guess the president's determination or, something along those lines.
Normally, these types of appeals take months before we hear back from the circuit court. But Professor Yin says this case is moving extremely fast, and he thinks there'll be a ruling by the end of the week before the temporary restraining order runs out. And there's a very unique aspect to this case as well. As we're waiting for the Ninth Circuit Court's ruling, the Seventh Circuit Court is hearing a very similar case about the National Guard being deployed to Chicago. So if the Ninth Circuit and the Seventh Circuit give opposite rulings, the Supreme Court would have to step in because that's what's called a circuit split or a legal split. So a lot of legal experts are closely watching these two cases. Reporting from South Portland, Spencer Schott, Fox 12 Oregon.